the One More Thing podcast. I am Aslan Doucet. I'm 17 years old. I'm going to be a senior next year at Lebanon Trail High School in Frisco, Texas. And I do theater and other things. So, yeah.
I'm Adelaide Doucet. I'm almost 13. My birthday's, I don't know.
Next Saturday?
Next Saturday. And I'm going to have a party. And, yeah.
I'm Asher Doucet. I'm 15. I'm going into sophomore year at Lebanon Trail High School. And I'm the favorite Doucet.
Awesome, guys. Well, welcome. Thanks for being here. Seems everybody's on vacation, so you guys get to fill in and grill your old dad with some questions about his sermon yesterday. So we were in week 2 of what Pastor Larry and I are calling the expectation gap. And it's really about there's this gap of what we expect and what we experience, right? Like Asher, you love to fish, so when we go out, we expect to catch, but sometimes we experience what? Catching nothing. Yeah, we don't catch anything. So that's the whole idea. And the point is, a lot of frustration in our life and disappointment in our life comes from that gap between what I expect and what I experience. And if you think about the times in your life where you've been really frustrated, it's because something did not work out the way you thought it should or it would, right? So that's the thing. But you guys have some questions for me based upon my sermon from yesterday. So, Aslan, I think you have the first question. So.
I do. I love grilling you with questions. So yesterday you said that one way to bridge the gap between who I am and who I want to be is to begin to expect more from myself than I do of others. So does that mean that I shouldn't expect anything from other people?
That's a really good question. I think yeah, obviously, you know, as a dad to you guys, I expect things from you and of you and for you. But I think the point I was trying to make is not that we totally don't expect things from other people, but that we first place the expectation on ourselves. So why would I ever expect you to do something that I myself would not be willing to do? And I think a lot of problems in life come from that, where we have people in our life who expect more from us than they do of themselves. And that can lead to a lot of disagreement. That can lead to a lot of blaming other people, the blame game, that, as Dr. Bauckham calls it. But I don't think we don't expect things from other people. We first have to place the onus on ourselves. So you guys one day will have your own families, and I think it's a good lesson. Like, what are you expecting of yourself right now? Even as 17, 13, and 15-year-olds, you should have an expectation of yourself before you place any expectation on even your parents. Like, there are natural expectations of your parents to provide and give you a place to stay and food. But in turn, what are you doing? What are you expecting? And I always ask the question, how am I preparing for what I'm expecting? So, Aslan, you're going to be a senior. So let me ask you a question. You're going to be a senior. How are you preparing for your expectation to go to college next year?
Well, first I got to find colleges. I got to save up money. I got to work out traveling and expenses and cars, and there's so much stuff to do. So, yeah.
So you have to prepare. Mm-hmm. And do you think you're really well prepared right now, or do you think this is the year? Yeah.
I think this is the year for me to start preparing.
Yeah. You have a whole year to do it. So, I mean, there's no pressure there. But I think that's the point, is when I can begin to know that I have these hard, deep expectations of myself, and I'm fulfilling those or preparing to fulfill those, then I have the license to start expecting things from other people. So, Adelaide, you have a question?
Yes. I thought one of the things you said in your sermon that was hard for me to understand was that a leader should be dangerous. Can you explain that more?
Yeah, that's the one that a lot of people had questions about. I made the claim that good leaders are not just inspiring leaders or encouraging leaders, they're dangerous people. And what I meant by that was they're dangerous in the sense that they have such a high expectation of themselves that they begin to challenge things in the world that aren't right. And the only way you can actually challenge things that are unjust or evil in the world is by being dangerous to those things. And I use Jesus as an example. Jesus was a very dangerous man because he posed a danger to a religious system that tried to oppress people, that tried to scare people into loving God. Like, if you don't love God, you're going to go to this place forever and ever. Even though that place doesn't exist, we're going to use it as a template to scare you into it. But also, the idea I used was, for me and for the congregation, like, you guys know, what do I do every morning when I get up and I start making my drink? Where am I headed?
The gym.
I'm going to the gym. Now, why do I work out? I've said this to you girls many times. Why does Daddy work out?
To protect us.
To protect you, right? Has nothing to do with looking good. Has nothing to do with me showing off my muscles on the beach or whatever. It has everything to do with, I know that looking good is secondary to, one, being healthy, and number two, being able to protect you. I mean, if we're out and about, let's say we go to Dallas one night for dinner. I'm visiting you guys. And a guy pulls out a knife on us. Am I going to look at that dude and go, in Jesus' name, please put the knife away? Or am I going to use all of my strength and power to do something to this guy, to protect you? Yeah, I mean, that's going to be the point. So for all of my strength to be able to bench press however much I bench press or squat or whatever, if I can't be dangerous to protect the people I love most, then I really have no expectation of myself. And that's part of it. You expect, without even having to say it. I mean, imagine if a guy pulls out a knife on us and I start running without you guys. They're like, Dad, what a loser dad, right? No, you would expect it without me doing anything. It's already in your mind. And I have to have that expectation of myself that I would step up and confront danger with not love, but with an equal amount of danger. And here's the scary thing that I talked about that really got people talking, was that I can imagine in my mind what I would do to that person that tried to hurt you guys. And it's not pretty. It's not a beautiful image. But that lives in us all. Have you guys ever had bad thoughts?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Bad thoughts about, I'm not going to say about me or your mom or whatever, but you've probably had bad thoughts about hurting someone or saying what you would say to someone in a particular situation. And instead of trying to hide that, how can we use that dark side in ourselves to fight darkness in the world? So think about Harry Potter, right? He had a piece of Voldemort where? In him. And even though he didn't like it, he had to tap into it in order to beat Voldemort, right? He couldn't just be cool, just Harry. He had to tap into a very dark place in order to defeat something that was even darker. And that's the point I was making, was leaders have to expect a lot of themselves, including things that you may not expect, and that is to go to places. Because Jesus goes into the temple one day. They're money changers, right? They're flipping money to make money. Like, hey, I'll give you this, and that's not what church is for, right? To make profit. And it's not like Jesus walks in and goes, hey guys, please stop. Please stop doing this. This is wrong. This is my dad's house. This is God's house. No, you know what he does? He flips the freaking tables, and he makes whips out of leather and runs the guys out of the temple by whipping them. Ooh. That's hardcore. Jesus is savage, bro. But while he had that capacity, he also had the capacity when he was on the cross to look down at the guys who nailed him to it and said what? Father, forgive them. And that's a dangerous leader. It's someone who has the capacity to do something necessary, but also to show love to those who are unlovable. So anyway, Ashley, you have the last question.
Oh, yeah. So the last point you made, Dad, was that when it seems like I'm not making any progress in becoming who I want to be, we should remember that God dwells within us. But sometimes I find that hard to believe. What would you say to someone who thinks that God could never live within them because of the things they've done?
Yeah. That's a hard one, man. There's so many people who give me a lot of crap about when I say that. I say it every week. I make sure to say it every week, that God doesn't live out there. God lives in here. And that's a true statement. Whether you believe it or feel it, it's not about a belief or a feeling. It's just an actual fact, right? Is that this is where God resides. And when we begin to know that, then I begin to see the distance, that expectation gap of who I am and who I want to be gets really small. because God's always working in my life, whether I see it, whether I believe it, whether I feel it. And this is why, as your dad, you know, I've been a pastor for a long time, and you guys know that. And I don't preach to you guys, right, at all, because I think it's best for you to see God working in our lives and knowing that he's doing it without having to, like, shove the Bible down your throat. But you guys know I am not a perfect dad. I make mistakes, but there's never a moment where I go, yeah, I've done something so bad that God has removed himself from me. And you guys know, what's the story of the Garden of Eden?
Oh.
Adam and Eve, what?
They
Took
were
the forbidden fruit.
Forbidden
Yeah.
fruit. And what does God do? He kicks them where? He kicks them
out.
out of the garden. And many people say, see, that's sin. That's sin. See, God had to kick them out. And I said, no, when you read that story, it's a beautiful story. So it's about expectation. What do I expect of myself? Then preparation. But then I have to understand what I call habitation. That even though God makes Adam and Eve leave his habitat, the Garden of Eden was his. He had rules. They didn't follow them. And it's not like God said, oh, you blew it, I'm done with you. No, I think the beauty of the story is in that moment, God says, you can't live here, but I can live there. And it's in that moment God resides within Adam and Eve. And it's a beautiful, for me, that's a beautiful story. That's the promise of God, is that when he says, I'll never leave you, never forsake you. Well, God, you kicked us out of the garden. No, I had to. Because you can't live there. Like, I can't live on Mars, right? Because I'm not built for it. And at that moment, Adam and Eve were no longer built for living in God's habitat. But God says, I can live in you. And that's what's happened to the human race, is we can't live in God's habitat, but God lives within us. And that's the big change. So yeah, that's the expectation gap, man. Week number 2. So Dr. Bacham will be up this week, getting us ready for the last series, or the last lesson in this series, and then getting ready for the big 25th anniversary for Suncoast.
Ooh.
How do you guys like Suncoast?
I love Suncoast.
Yes, I love
Great.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really awesome place to be, huh?
Best place.
Yeah. Well, I love you guys. I'm so glad you were here to help us do the one more thing.
Oh, yeah. Love you too. So glad to be here.
Awesome.